Hey guys, welcome back to the OT Latina YouTube channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Brianda. I am a pediatric occupational therapist, and I am also the writer and creator of the OT Latina blog. Today's video is part 2 of my new video series where I go through NBCOT practice questions using TrueLearn. As I've mentioned in my previous video, I used TrueLearn when I was first studying for the NBCOT exam about 4 years ago, and it really helped me learn how to understand the questions and also understand the rationale behind each question. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video, go ahead and check it out. I already answered 3 practice questions in that video. And just a quick disclaimer, this is in collaboration with TrueLearn. This is a company that I really believe in, and I do think that they help students on their journey to pass the NBCOT exam. So just like the last video, this will be super casual where I will go through 3 NBCOT practice questions using the existing knowledge that I have. Keep in mind, I have not studied for the NBCOT exam in 4 years, so I am going through these questions with a fresh mind and whatever knowledge that I have currently. I will take you through each TrueLearn practice question one by one, and I will also go through each rationale following each question so that you get an idea of why the question was right or why the question was wrong. Now, this is a really great feature that I really appreciate about TrueLearn. I feel like other practice materials that I've used before just didn't have good rationales, and I was always left even more confused. Anyways, enough talking. I want you to see what TrueLearn is all about, and I also want us to practice answering questions together. So let's get started. Okay, I've got my laptop here ready to go, so let's start answering some questions. Question 1. A client with osteoarthritis is experiencing difficulty managing day to day work tasks and home tasks. Which of the following is best for the OT practitioner to recommend to address this issue? So let's look at our options here. First option, option A, importance of continuing to participate in all activities. So for option A, I don't think I'm going to pick this option because the question was asking the best recommendation from the occupational therapy practitioner to this client. And I feel like this recommendation isn't really that helpful. Obviously, it's important to participate in as many daily activities as you can. This person has osteoarthritis, so some things may be limited. I just feel like this is not a helpful answer, so I'm going to continue looking at my options. So next we have option B, avoid range of motion and strength activities. So this option is something that I don't think I'm going to pick. I don't think that I would recommend someone with osteoarthritis to avoid all range of motion and strengthening activities. I think that is a pretty important part of recovery or treatment for them. As occupational therapists, we almost always recommend to continue range of motion and strengthening activities because the moment that you stop doing those things is the moment you're going to steadily decline. So option B is out for me. Next, we have option C, importance of balancing rest and activity. So option C sounds very obvious. It's very important to rest, and I think that is a good recommendation. It's also kind of like option A, where it's like, that's like too easy, and like obviously you still want them to do these things. But let's look at option D before we eliminate option C. Option D, avoid stretches and movement in the morning due to joint stiffness. Okay, so I am not picking option D because kind of the same thing as avoiding like range of motion or strengthening. You don't want to stop all stretching in the morning. I feel like stretching would actually help in the mornings before you get your tasks started for the day. Obviously, this person's joints are going to be stiff in the morning, maybe even in the evening. They have osteoarthritis. A person with osteoarthritis requires continued rest and then task completion. So, for example, if you're folding clothes, you're going to fold clothes maybe for 2 to 3 minutes and then take a 2 to 3 minute break. And that's how your task will continue on, depending on the severity of your osteoarthritis. So, out of all of these options, I think the option I am going to go with is option C. Okay, now let's see if I'm right. Boom, we got it. The answer was answer C. Okay, now really quickly, we will go through the rationale. So, the rationale here is balancing rest and activity will allow for energy to be maintained throughout the day. When working with clients with osteoarthritis, pain and fatigue management must be addressed in intervention planning. Okay, now let's review why it wasn't the other answers. So, it was not answer A because occupations and activities change with age, roles, interests, and health needs. Although OTs can help clients engage in whatever tasks are more meaningful, the client should direct which occupations and activities they would like to participate in. With increased pain, fatigue, and joint strain, the client may want to change which activity to participate in and should be able to direct their participation. Okay, so this pretty much reviews what I had kind of said, where yes, you would ideally want them to participate in all activities, but realistically, they're not going to. Some things are going to have to change. Next, we have why it was not option B. So, range of motion and strength activities reduce pain and promote functional engagement. They promote continued movement of the joints. Without range of motion and strength activities, this client may experience reduced movement, stiffness, and increased pain. So, this is also similar to what I said. You don't want to recommend to stop range of motion and strengthening activities. Instead, you want to encourage to continue doing range of motion and strengthening because it can only help, it can't hinder. And if you stop those activities, you're going to decline. Next, we have answer D. So it was not answer D because individuals with osteoarthritis often have joint stiffness and tenderness in the morning due to inactivity of resting all night. Movement and stretches help manage this stiffness and pain, usually within 30 minutes of movement. So, pain and stiffness in osteoarthritis gets worse when you are not active or when you are not moving or you spend a long period of time without any active movement. So, if you recommend to not continue any more stretches, that can be a detriment to that person. So, yeah, the answer was answer C. Let's go on to our next question. Okay, question number 2. An OT practitioner is working with a client who has a sustained traumatic brain injury, or a TBI, to improve memory strategies. The practitioner reviews the client's pre injury habits and introduces specific phrases or cues to help the client perform and link together the steps of a particular activity. Which memory strategy best describes this approach? So, first we have option A, mnemonics. So, from what I recall, mnemonics involve phrases or like little rhymes or poems, sometimes like images or pictures that you can use to remember things. So, for example, you probably use mnemonics a lot when trying to remember information while you're studying. I honestly can't think of any mnemonics right now because I hardly use mnemonics for myself. Okay, I had to Google an example of a mnemonic and then it hit me. So, if you remember PEMDAS from like calculus or math or algebra, I don't remember which one. I'm really bad at math. That would be an example of like an acronym, like turn into like a little phrase or word to help you remember what each letter means. Do not ask me if I remember what PEMDAS stands for. I don't. I just know it's like a math term. Anyways, I might not choose this one because I feel like that's not what they're doing here. They're more, I guess, the terminology here is that they're linking together steps of an activity. So I don't think that's a mnemonic. So I don't think I'm going to pick that option. Next, we have option B, task specific training. Okay, so for this option, I think it might be the answer because this training that they're doing in the question, they're doing it during the activity and kind of helping the patient link different phrases together while completing the activity. So, this is why I believe it is task specific training. But let's look at our option C just to make sure. Option C, we have self instructional training. Now, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what self instructional training is, but just from reading it, it sounds like maybe this is something where the patient would be a little bit more autonomous with their training. I think they would have a little bit more involvement in the way that they are able to retain information. So maybe something like writing something down, like a to do list. I think that would be something close to that. But we will look at our rationale and see. But for now, I am going to stick with option B. So the answer was option B. Now let's see why it was and why it was not the other answers. So the reason it was answer B is because task-specific training involves the use of chaining 9 discrete activities by using linking phrases. Okay, so I actually didn't really know that, but I just assumed because they were doing something more active during an activity, it was more of like a task-specific training. But I guess I got lucky on that answer. But still, you use the other answers to your advantage, right? To eliminate them. And then you're kind of left with like the best answer. Okay, so the reason it was not mnemonics is because it is a broad term that involves strategies used to remember something. Strategies include rhymes, acronyms, poems, and imagery techniques. So I did touch on the acronym part. That's not what they were doing here. They weren't really like using pictures to help them remember anything. Um, but and they also weren't using poems to help them remember anything. So it's not mnemonics. So the reason it wasn't answer C is because self-instructional training involves the use of a diary and reflecting on the activity using the WSTC strategy. Okay, so I was kind of close when I said that self-instructional training had to do more like where the person is being a little bit more autonomous with their training, and I said something like a to-do list, but here it's saying it's more like journaling. I don't know what WSTC is, but let's review it. So, WSTC is W is what are you going to do? S is select a strategy for the task. T is try out the strategy. And C is check how the strategy is working. So it seems like self instructional training has like kind of its own mnemonic in it. So it has its own particular strategy that you use when utilizing that type of training. And so this kind of sounds like trial and error to me. So I guess that's one way that I could remember that type of training. That you're kind of using like trial and error on yourself and you're kind of like journaling that and making note of that. Okay, so let's move on to question 3. An OT is preparing to evaluate a client following a recent cerebral vascular accident, or a CVA. In the chart, the OT notes that the client has been evaluated by speech therapy and appears to have a language based disability with trouble understanding written words. The speech therapy documentation identifies that the client has experienced difficulty reading since childhood. Which of the following best describes this client's language based disability? Okay, let's look at our options here. So first we have option A, hyperlexia. This is not the answer because the patient has a language-based disability, or actually reading the question, it honestly sounds like they have dyslexia. They have difficulty reading. Um, and because this is something that has been occurring since childhood, I don't think it's something that's occurred because of the CVA. This is just something that they found out during it. So I don't think it's hyperlexia because hyperlexia is the opposite of dyslexia. So hyperlexia is where you have like I think like incredible reading speed or something like that. So yeah, that's not the answer. Next we have option B, dyslexia. Boom boom boom. I think that's the answer. So I'm just going to choose it and then let's move on to the next two. Next we have option C, which is alexia. Now, Alexia is probably less common. You hardly ever hear about it, but Alexia is an acquired like reading disability. The question is trying to trick you here because it's letting you know that this patient had a CVA, the speech therapist went and evaluated them, and they have found out that they have this like language disability or like this reading disability. But the key in this question is that this is something that, yes, it was found during the evaluation, but this is something that the client has had since they were a child. So it's nothing new. I do not think the answer is C, Alexia. Let's go on to our last one. Last option is option D, dysgraphia. So, no, answer D is not the answer. The client has trouble understanding written words. Dysgraphia is difficulty with like handwriting, pretty much. So, graphia, that means handwriting. So, yeah, the answer is not dysgraphia because dysgraphia is like difficulty with like handwriting or like legibility of handwriting. So, yeah, let's look at the rationale and see if we are right. Okay, so yes, the answer was in fact answer B, dyslexia. So the reason that it was dyslexia is because people with dyslexia often experience difficulties with spelling, writing, and pronouncing words. So the reason it was dyslexia is because it is a cluster of symptoms that result in people having difficulties with specific language skills, particularly reading. It is a developmental deficit in learning to read and begins in childhood. Okay, that is why it was dyslexia. Now, the reason it wasn't answer A is because hyperlexia is a disorder where people have advanced reading skills. Okay, that's exactly what I said. So, not answer A. Answer C, alexia occurs when one loses the ability to read after a stroke or an injury to the brain. Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, so alexia is different from dyslexia in that alexia is also kind of like a language disorder or a reading disorder, but this is acquired after a brain injury. So, if they've had it since childhood, this is dyslexia. If they didn't have it before and then they got a brain injury and then now they have a reading disorder, this is now called alexia. Now, the reason it wasn't answer D, dysgraphia, is because this makes writing legibly difficult. Okay, so dysgraphia is difficulty with handwriting, which is why it was not the answer. Okay, guys, that was my very last question for today. I really hope that this video helped you on your journey to pass the NBCOT exam. If you are interested in trying out TrueLearn, I will link it below in the description. I also have a discount code you can use at purchase. Go ahead and type in OT Latina when you purchase for a discount. TrueLearn was really a big help, and I truly believe in doing as many practice questions as possible when you're studying. And I really like that you can make practice tests by category when you're using TrueLearn. This is just a really great feature to use while you're studying different sections. TrueLearn makes it really easy for you to make practice tests and tailor them to whatever you're studying at the moment. So, for example, if you are studying only strokes or neurological disorders one day, then you can go ahead and use TrueLearn to make a practice test with only like stroke or neuro questions. And this makes it really easy for you to just kind of like focus in on those questions and see if you learned and retained the information that you just studied. I think TrueLearn is just a really great tool for students to use. They really know what students are looking for while studying. And yeah, just go ahead and try it out if it sounds like something that you want to use during your studying. And please subscribe to the OT Latina YouTube channel. I try to post videos every Friday. And again, this series is something that I am posting every other Friday where I will be answering more practice questions. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you in the next video.